Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 2 p.m. Southern Africa Standard Time. It's 2 p.m. Allow me to welcome you all to this session, to this webinar, which is navigating export uncertainty, exporting to the EU, Canada, UK, USA. You can rearrange the targeted markets there. It's all the same. Thank you for making time for this important session. It is important considering what's happening, what's currently obtaining globally. You don't need any introduction to that, but that's what we need to navigate today. My name is Cosmos Mamunze. I'm with 8023 Group, and I'll be moderating this session today. The purpose of this session is to help African exporters to explore the above four markets, and which in a sense also helps in terms of allowing for export market diversification. Right. Our program is as shown on the screen. We've got Leslie Batchelor. She's going to take us through, give an overview. We've got James Flynn. He's going to help with the navigation part. And we've got Marlene Joss. She's going to provide a testimonial. And Melanie, she's going to help us with the Q&A. Right. So in terms of the speaker lineup, Leslie Batchelor, she's an exports advocate. She has been in the game for a long time, and at one point she was a Director General for the Institute of Export International Trade in the UK for over 12 years. And right now she's managing export boot camps, which is also going to benefit exporters that are on the call. And she'll be followed by James Flynn. I'm sure most of you or a number of you know him. Some of you have already been supported by James as well. His company is a global import agent or Priority. That's the parent company. He is a consultant on market export compliance, particularly when we're handling the US market. He has been handling the FDA registration, FISMA requirements. So James is going to help us with how do we navigate the current system, current challenges that we are facing. So Marlene Joss is she's with Food Care Angola, an Angolan company. It's a company that was helped by a global import agent to secure their FDA registration. So she's just gonna share with us what she's doing and how she managed to get registered. So she's gonna provide a testimonial. And Melanie Greenwald, she's with Westgrow for those that are in Southern Africa, and I think even within other parts of Africa would know her. She's not new to most of you. She's gonna help us with the question and answer session. So she's going to be managing that. Right. So those are our speakers. With that said, I would like to encourage you to participate. Please post your questions in the chat box, and the slides that are being shared will also be shared via the emails that you have shared when you registered for this session. With that said, I would like to wish you a great session. I'm handing over to Leslie now. And thank you. Leslie, over to you.
Second, I'll just move Leslie over to be the host.
Yes.
You're still...
There you go, Leslie. You can share your screen and take it away.
Thank you. Right. Here we go. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to you all. This is a great time of change and confusion and uncertainty. And of course, everybody would love to have a little bit of certainty. And I really just want to give you some certainty and some of the questions and perhaps some planning that we can do around it. So, let's just have a quick look at this. We're looking at the challenges for, South African businesses entering the USA compared with Canada, EU, and the UK. And I've broken it down. So this is me. This is a very frightening picture of me, and just really wanting to say how much I believe that international trade is good for the world. I think that we look at how it all started sort of after the last world war that we had, and honestly, 60% of the population has been brought out of poverty because of world trade. And the more we trade, the better we know each other and the less likely we are all to fight. That's what we say. Anyway, this is my colleague, Holly. She is a very, very talented lady. She works very much on freight forwarding and customs clearance. She sets up warehouses. She does a lot on bonded warehousing. And, she's actually lived in Africa and worked there for a couple of years too. So, she's been great, and she works very much in the food and beverage as well as retail and automotive industries. So, a great person to have on board. Arnie is my other colleague, and he works as a senior trade specialist. He works, with a lot of the big names, Deloitte and Grant Thornton in the UK. And these guys really like him because he worked with Brussels and he worked with the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Geneva at one stage too. So what I plan to do is sort of give a sort of an overview of the South African business expansion ambitions, but also try and think about understanding, and I've broken it down into these three things really, understanding the market entry issues you're going to face, some of the finance and regulatory issues that you'll face, and sometimes, oh sorry, finance and capital raising and regulatory and compliance issues. And then I can know with absolute confidence that James is going to say a lot more about the compliance and regulatory issues that are coming up later on as well. So I think we've got a full agenda for you here. So I'll just start off with talking about market entry challenges, and I'm going to break it down by country. So we look at the USA to start off with. We know it's a highly competitive and mature market. I think we can all say with a great hand on hearts that, we've got trade tensions impacting bilateral relations. We are very pleased. In fact, the markets across the world were very pleased when they started the Chinese and USA having talks, and they've actually compromised a little. And we find them now in a circumstance where they've put what they call a pause, which really, I suppose, in tax firm ways we should be calling a suspension of activity. But of course, it isn't really suspended because we still got the other things. So no matter what we do, and the UK have just signed a trade agreement with the USA, it's not a free trade agreement, it's just an agreement around trade, which is a little bit confusing for us all, really. It hasn't got a huge amount of detail in it, so we can only say with certainty that there is sort of still uncertainty around it. And basically, the trade deals are causing a lot of problems. But whatever happens from now onwards, there's going to be another 10% on everybody's products as they go around the world. If you get additional ones on there, it will because you're very successful at selling them into the USA, and they're buying what, they consider to be too many of them. And, we found already with the USA and the UK agreement that they've started putting quotas on things. So they'll say that, you have to do that. So this is making things more and more difficult for us all. We actually haven't got the detail of how these quotas will work. But for instance, we have a quota around beef. And beef, we export normally around about 2,000 metric tons of beef every year, mainly to the EU because they like non-hormone treated beef. We have just signed a trade agreement saying that we will have a quota of 13,000 tons of the beef, and that means obviously that allows America to sell 13,000 tons to us and us to sell 13,000 tons. Well, as you can probably gather from our 2,000 tons, we don't have that much beef to sell. So it's going to become very interesting how these quotas work and how they measure them. And of course, within the USA, the perceptions of, the BBEE policies, how they affect relationships, this is a broad-based situation, I appreciate, but they don't perceive it as such, and their perceptions are what really can halt your entry into that market. So again, this is another thing. We've also got the benefit that should outweigh this, which is the AGOA or AGOA benefit with the US businesses. Again, these are things that they don't all understand very well. And I think we have to understand that the Americans aren't big exporters. They have a huge home market of their own. So actually, we do have to do some work educating them sometimes about how this works. You also find you have a complex political and regulatory environment simply because you have state legislation and you have federal legislation, and that can sometimes conflict and sometimes add more and more time when you're trying to actually achieve anything in the United States. Sometimes I fear that they try and hide behind that when they're making decisions too. But so as far as Canada is concerned, they have a great welcoming strategy. The visas are quite easy to get hold of, provincial nominee programs. These are quite accessible. They have strong bilateral relations and shared values. So, they won't have any problem with how you do business at all. And they can act as a gateway to the North American market. Although having said that, I think at the moment we're all learning that this isn't quite as easy as we thought it would be in the first place. Obviously, the same with Mexico, and they've only just recently signed deals. I think one of the things that we're all learning is that deals that were in the past are still in jeopardy, and even if you've signed a new deal, they can change quite easily. So, obviously, I think the message that we get here in the UK is very much that we're looking at expanding our relationships. And as you've seen, probably, hopefully in the news, we've just signed a deal with with India, which was a free trade agreement, which we're very pleased to have in place. So let's think about some of the market entry challenges for the European Union. And of course, the thing that we have here is very much, I'm just going to reduce me that, there we go, very much the termination of the bilateral investment increases the risks. The strict import regulations, especially on agricultural exports, citrus products, these are they do cause problems. The provides the benefits of the different trade agreements. We're sitting there and we're wondering how this is all going to work. And of course, the South African Development Community Economic Partnership Agreement. My goodness, these are such great acronyms, aren't they? It does offer some sort of tariff reductions and trade benefits. I think it's a question that perhaps we need to start reaching out to the European Union more and finding out how we can work with them in more detail. The need for compliance with the EU standards and certifications, and especially we find here in the UK, the sanitary and phytosanitary, which is all to do with food and animals, it begins to be more compliance. But actually, once you've got the hang of it, you'll find that it is. It's another process, but it's still easy enough to understand. And again, I think with help, you can always get these things right. As far as the challenges for the United Kingdom are concerned, we do have some challenges because we're no longer operating exactly the same as the EU, although we were part of them. So there's a lot of similarities in what we're doing. We are going to be bringing in our own sanitary and phytosanitary, but it's been postponed several times now, so it's a shame. The complexities around our visas are, they are costly, and sometimes they do hinder that mobility. Having said that, I think if you work with a partner organization within the UK, it helps because we can help sponsor you, we can help get you into that. It's a terrible thing that, as we look at it all, there is a sort of UK Africa trade relations decline. But to be quite honest, I think Trump has actually done us all a big favor because we're all starting to think about how we can all work together better, whether we work with the USA or around it, or perhaps try and augment our businesses through doing these additional compromises that we're looking at doing each time. So, as far as using the UK as a financial hub and technical hub, it's limited, but limited cash flow to African businesses. So we need to think about how we can get them to invest more, how we can get the United Kingdom to get a little bit more behind the African businesses. If I move on to the finance and capital raising, access to finance is a critical factor for international expansion. The United States has some of the world's deepest and most sophisticated capital markets. They offer a wide range of funding options for venture capitalists all the way through to the markets, public markets. Although this abundance does come with quite a lot of complexities. I think, the South African businesses must comply with a whole host of regulations, related to fundraising, disclosures, governance of your business, the investment concerns. Again, I don't want to keep mentioning it, but the broad based black policies, these are causing certain problems. And of course, they worry. In the USA, they're very worried about labor practices. We have a lot of trouble with, as the United Kingdom, selling because of our labor practices. So, it's not just you that's going through it. We're all going through it, as it were. And of course, just finally, this impact on the diplomatic tensions is putting a strain on investment. And indeed, some of the riskier ones are not getting the attention that they would like to get. So moving across into Canada, and of course they are, supportive business immigration. They have facilitation programs and investment programs that will help on this. This is a great benefit to us all because they recognize that they have things like a startup visa to help really attract entrepreneurs so that they can really contribute to the Canadian economy. It's a really great system. They've got, the usual venture capitalists, the angel investors, business incubators, and they all provide funding and support. So I think there's a great deal of positivity around perhaps trying to investigate more about Canada. I always used to think that Canada was a great starting place anyway, because the United States is such a vast country. You really have to start thinking about where you're going to start. And, that in itself, you're really having to wade through quite a lot of information to start establishing exactly where you would look for even a distributor to help you work in that market. So it's a great idea to do that. We have a lot of areas around compliance, and they do have the operator at MLIA, which helps with the job creation. I think Canada is looking good. It's a great stepping stone across to the USA. We used to think about talking about working in Belgium first before you went into the EU. And now I think Canada is becoming a really good starting point for a lot of businesses, especially if you're not a large company. Where am I? So now we're just thinking about raising capital within the EU. They've got a high compliance system there. It's a very difficult country in some ways, but once you've got a hang of it all, you'll find brilliantly that the compliance is simpler. It's never going to stop being highly complex. And it will always cause you extra costs. But this is something that we're learning all the way through. This is actually what we've got to realize is a lot of us are going to have to look at our pricing. We've got to look at our pricing, our landed pricing in the country of import. And we've got to understand how we're going to make money out of this, because we still all need to make money. And yes, unfortunately, it is going to push inflation up, and it's very disappointing with this. It really is. Increased legal uncertainty, of course, these things are causing us a lot of concerns at the moment. Financing challenges due to perceived investment risks. Well, I put this in here because I think it does mean that, people are a little bit more cautious because they have so much compliance to finish off. So do seek some help, do understand what it is you're doing, but actually make sure that you've got the costs of that compliance factored into your pricing. Pricing, I think, is the one thing that everyone's revisited because nobody's quite sure what the impact of this thing. If you're selling over to the USA at the moment, then obviously you're used to this tight rope that they're working all the time. But think about how you're pricing to that market in particular, but also think about looking at the other markets, because if you've worked in the USA, you've already got quite a good template for moving forward. So do think about, embracing other markets, because there are a lot of different countries out there that if you've got good quality product, you can always sell it. Of course, it does depend on the price, unfortunately. So thinking about moving forward into the UK, of course, we are quite a complex market to deal with. There's financial gaps because, there's a risk of aversion. UK institutions are quite rigid, quite difficult to open their minds to new opportunities. So if you're preparing to go into the UK, let's think about how you're going to present yourself. Let's think about what you're going to say properly about your product and your business. Get all your ducks in a row, as we say. Make sure that you understand exactly how you're going to operate and what processes you're going to be working with, because honestly, UK institutions will demand that. And they will be working on finance. They won't be financing themselves. So you'll be working with the banking world as well here. We've had a lot of uncertainties around Brexit. Brexit still continues to cause us a lot of problems, and it has impacted on whether or not multinational companies actually invest in our country as well. So we've had a lot of hiccups, and we've had a lot of learning that we've had to do. There is a very sophisticated financial market there, and sometimes we think that they're limited, in their appetite for the African risk, as they call it. But I think increasingly, as more things go wrong, more people are looking across to Africa and saying, perhaps we should be doing more business. And obviously, we've got connections with a lot of African countries, and we should be doing that in a much more constructive way than we are at the moment. So if you guys reach out to us, I'm sure we can find you partners. I'm sure we can talk to you about how we can get this going. It's complicated, but I promise you, we're good people, I promise. And then finally, I want to spend some time just talking about, the regulatory and compliance issues. I'm very aware that James is going to talk about this as well, but try and bear with me because it is a major consideration. It's a major consideration for any new market you go to. You have to think about how you're going to do that. It's not just about how you operate in that country. Well, it is about how you operate in that country, but it's also about things like the rule of law that you'd be working with, and any of the diplomatic tensions that are shifting at the moment. The need to have robust compliance programs is really vital to try and make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into and at what level, whether it's at a state level or whether you're working at a federal level. For the regulatory and compliance with Canada, the biggest thing here is, again, the immigration compliance, which is critical for business visas, provincial specific entrepreneur streams. They require tailored strategies so you understand how you're going to operate, and transparent and stable regulatory environments are really, I think Canada offers a lot of great benefits there. With the EU, we have very strict import standards. It's very impressive. The certifications are impressive. They're complicated to get to, but once you've got them, you can just refer back to them. And you have to operate under a certain level of standards. But the agricultural products, once you've got used to how they operate, again, you'll get into a process and you'll understand what it is they actually need. Of course, there are increased legal risks with the business investment treaties. I think it is. It's a problem that we have to try and resolve. I'm not quite sure we can do that very quickly. And the need for investment in compliance and technological and processes that you need to work within this are really, they can be quite high to start off with once you're operating, once you're understanding them. But again, this is about pricing. It's making sure you're getting the right return on the investment that you've made. And it's about making sure that you understand that that your pricing is going to be impacted by the setup costs that you're going to have. Of course, the insurances and that type of thing are all part and parcel of all of this. So the regulatory and compliance side of things for the UK, we do now, and increasingly after yesterday, we're going to have more complex visa and immigration processes. There are companies in the UK that can help you with that. We know some of them if you want us to put you in touch with them, but do get it right, because you can waste a lot of money and time if you're not actually able to get across to meet people. Try and get people to go over to visit you. That's a great thing as well, because Brits love to travel. We are still evolving our post-Brexit trade and regulatory framework, so we are still a little bit uncertain as to exactly what everything looks like. When we did our deal with the USA, we didn't actually agree to changing any of our food standards. So, if you work with the Brits, you can work with the European Union, because we're very closely aligned in that respect. Again, James is going to talk a lot more about that later on. The financial regulations do affect the way we can access any capital. So, make sure that everything you're doing has paperwork, you have the provenance, you understand what it is you're doing, and just take some advice wherever you are, because I think it will make a huge difference to your business, knowing how you can operate and what the frameworks are will help you tremendously. So just sort of trying to sum up a little bit here. So the South African domestic challenges impacting on your expansion, exchange rate volatility, of course, affecting your pricing and your costs. The dollar has been all over the place recently. If using that as your main currency, that's going to be causing you problems. A lot of companies are shifting their use and using different currencies to get through. Obviously, the euro has been very popular, and it depends where you're buying your packaging from, etc. You may want to start thinking about using different currency and pricing in different ways. That just means more bank accounts effectively, and holding money until it's a good rate to exchange, and using money wisely as far as your supply chains are concerned. Energy reliability issues. I mean, we have problems with energy, but it's that we pay an absolute fortune in the UK. In fact, I think we have the highest energy costs of all the countries in the world, and that's a huge problem for us all. But the reliability of energy as well, and when you're trying to work with different countries and you're trying to, we were very fortunate. We managed to set up this Wi-Fi and broadband access to the video call. I've tried to have meetings with people over in Rwanda. It hasn't been quite so easy, and we've got all sorts of problems when we're trying to work with Nigeria. So I think, we all know that this is an issue for all of Africa, really. The broad-based compliance affecting international perceptions and partnerships. That's an education process. I would suggest that you just talk about it up front, and you talk about how it's not the problem they think it is, and try and manage their way through it, or at least try and have a strategy when you're negotiating around that. The importance of managing the domestic risks, obviously, before you get into international expansion. I think that goes without saying. Again, we're all here to help you to understand how to move forward with that. So, summary and recommendations. USA, it's high potential, but so complex, and it's such a political environment. I think my advice and my advice to British companies is, unless you're absolutely certain of your activity there, we can help you try and refine that and try and do the best you can there. But, try thinking about other markets as well. And I think, Canada comes up as the most welcoming. They seem to like entrepreneurs and they're supportive about the immigration, and it seems to be a stable market. It hasn't been, well, it hasn't been bought by the USA. The EU is attractive, but the high compliance costs and legal uncertainties, it does mean that you have to make sure you're being advised by good people. I think there are a lot of good people out there, and I think the EU is a very positive place to do business once you're in there, and it's about finding the right partners really to help you do that. UK, the financial hub with the challenges we've had from Brexit and visa complexities that are getting worse, doesn't make it as good as some of the other markets, but we still want to do business with people. We're open for business. We want our shelves filled with lots of products from all over the world. So try and bear with us, and we'll work with you on that, I promise. So we think you should be, tailoring your strategies for each market, because each market's unique and it has its own challenges. And there's always a way round. It's just the cost and whether or not you want to make those efforts. And also, we can't emphasize the compliance, the risk management, and really developing local partnerships within those markets. So that was a whistle-stop tour through, the basics of it all, the fundamental questions. If you've got any more, do add them to the chat and for our discussion later. I'm really happy to do that. You can find me on this email address. I know that Cos is going to share that later, or find me on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to help. So I think I'm now going to stop sharing, and then I think I'm going to, she says, I don't know how to change this, James. I think you're going to have to take over, and because I don't have three dots anywhere. Oh, three dots down there. Oh, just a minute.
Don't worry, I've got it.
Oh, have you? Thank you, James. Sorry, darling.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Sorry to be a nuisance.
Okay, I'm just going to make Melanie a panelist first, so hopefully that will go through in the next few moments. And now I shall share my screen. Okay. So we're going to do this screen here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the screen. Can you see that okay, Leslie? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I can. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Go for it.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Very insightful presentation, and it's a Venn diagram with some overlap with what we do, but you're obviously much more on the international trade side. We're involved in the compliance side of that. So hopefully I'm going to be able to touch on some of these compliance points all the way through. But I do realize that one of the big hot potatoes, so to speak, these days is the whole tariff situation, which has been, well, to call it a roller coaster ride over the past few months would be pretty much the biggest understatement of the century. However, it does appear that we are coming out of the most disruptive part of that whole saga. It's not done yet by any means, but it does appear that Mr. Trump is being pressurized by the US side of things. In particular, I think they're very worried about the US supply chain, for example. So what am I going to cover? I'm going to look at the kind of landscape as it stands at the moment with US food tariffs, because this is a really big concern. If you're looking at 20 or 30% tariff on your product, it can make a huge difference as to whether the product is going to be financially viable in the US. And as Leslie indicated, many exporters that we are seeing are now actively looking outside the US for export opportunities. And again, as Leslie mentioned, you can really look on the US as the basis for a template for regulatory acceptance in other markets. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we get through this. However, with all of that said, I want to look at the kind of overview of where tariffs are now, what the current and future risks may look like. I'm also going to touch on some tariff reduction strategies that you might want to consider, and hopefully you'll get some value from those. We'll talk about new market opportunities. Well, not just new market opportunities, they've always been there, but as you'll see in a moment, there's a reason why people go for the US market. And we'll look at some best practices and insights with respect to some of the high level detail, at least, of the regulatory side of things. So please do be aware that we have a chat area in the webinar. Please post any questions you may have there for any one of us for later on in the Q&A. Okay, a little bit about Global Import Agent, as Cos mentioned. The parent company is Primority, and we are based, as you can hear with my wonderful accent, we are based in Scotland here. We also have offices in Florida, and we also have our development and technical office in New Delhi in India. In addition to that, we have a number of partners around the globe, primarily in the US, Middle East, Southern Africa, and Australia and New Zealand at this time. Over time, that partner network will grow. We're always interested in working with new people who've got an overlap with what we can provide for them and that they can bring to the table as well for us. I myself did spend 3 years in South Africa between 2005 and 2008. So I know the place, the culture, the people very, very well. And it's one of my favorite places in the world, I have to say. So a little bit about our background of our customers. This is just to give you a little bit of flavor about the breadth and depth of our experience, etc. Customers like Weetabix, UK's largest cereal manufacturer, they use our technology platform to manage their compliance. We also do work with Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, importing mineral water into the UK. That's an ongoing project. We have brands like Oryx Desert Salt, who are, I think, fairly well known to most of you. We're supporting them and have been for a number of years now with their products into retail distribution in the US. We also are working with Afri-Tea and coffee blenders as well. So a wide range of companies, US, EU, UK, really all over the world, etc. And overall, we are working with more than 300 manufacturers, over 400 US importers, and 50 plus agents and brokers. These numbers are probably a bit less than what are shown here, maybe a little bit out of date. But essentially, we are a technology and a consulting compliance company. The technology allows us to really streamline that process. All compliance is really about record keeping and validation and verification. So we've got this technology aspect, and then we have consultants who operate our software in conjunction with our customers to document, verify, record, and stand up to regulatory scrutiny, whether that's FDA, UK Food Standards Agency, or Canadian Food Inspection Agency, etc. So let's talk about the US market opportunity and why it is such a lucrative opportunity. So as you can see here, from 2017 through to 2025, the actual percentage of worldwide online share of grocery sales has gone from 3.5 to 9.2%, which is huge. And that is only set to continue. It's the same story with US online grocery sales, and I'm going to talk about why that's important in a moment or a little bit later. You can see that this is also has been increasing, and the actual dollar amount in billions of actual US online grocery spend has more than quadrupled since 2019. So the fact is that out of a population of about 350 million, there are 150 million, 155 million plus who purchase groceries online. And that includes the likes of Amazon. It also includes Walmart, who are actually one of the biggest online grocery sellers. But the other big retailers are retailers like Kroger, Target, Albertsons, etc. So this just gives you some idea of the size and nature of the online opportunity, in addition to the brick and mortar retail and distributor opportunity. This makes the US the biggest market in the world for people outside the US wanting to sell their products and expand their market. So that's why it's attractive. So in terms of, there are no real numbers on grocery sales and imports, not that are easy to get anyway. But it's helpful to look at the top 10 agri-food exporters to the US just to get some idea of why there has been so much attention on tariffs with China, Mexico, Canada, and then, of course, Japan and the European Union. So these top five represent a massive amount of the overall agri-food products imported into the US. So this is not online grocery or anything like that. This is just a proxy for food coming into the US, for example. And so taking that into account, when we start looking at the tariff threat list, you can really see that those top 10 are being targeted quite heavily. But in addition, we've seen others, South Africa being a notable example, being targeted with 30%, and then it's been paused, etc. Even Australia and the UK and particularly Europe are all still having the cloud, the shadow of these tariffs being held over them for the kind of various reasons. We'll talk about that in a second. So as of, I guess, yesterday, it could have changed already by today. It's been so volatile. The way that the tariffs have been threatened and or implemented, China currently faces the 30% tariffs, having agreed to have a moratorium to delay the 125% or 145% tariffs that were threatened to them and had been implemented, actually. So that has climbed down to 30%. We've got Mexico and Canada on 25%. Japan kind of been out of the headlines a little bit. 24% they're facing. EU 20%. And then South Korea 25%, Vietnam 46%. So there's a lot of big numbers kind of being thrown around there. And at the moment, the UK has 10%, South Africa has 10%, which has been extended for 90 days. As I understand it, I haven't verified every single thing here, but as I understand it, as of yesterday, that is where we are at the moment. So why is this happening? So the key reasons which the Trump administration is claiming are these here. So President Trump wants to protect US jobs, which you can kind of understand. He's been elected to do that. However, the way in which maybe it's gone about is not necessarily what the world was expecting. To reduce the deficit and to promote fair trade as the US administration sees it. To enhance national security. We're talking about drugs and fentanyl with China and Canada and Mexico as being a key part of that. To generate revenue and to boost US production. So from a US perspective, these are all, laudable objectives. However, it's perhaps the way in which it's happened has been a bit of a shock, not only to the world, but to the global economic system, as the stock markets really show from that perspective. So what are the possible impacts then? So we already know some of the key impacts. what we're seeing in terms of patterns is that it tends to be a heavy tariff is threatened first, and then people come to the negotiating table, and then there's some a quote unquote horse trading that goes on, and the blanket 10% tariff is the base level. That's really what happened with the UK trade deal that was struck, because the tariffs were not 10% before, but now they're 10%. But the main benefit to having a deal in the sort of single digits or early double digits level is that you've got certainty, economic certainty. No one wants to send a container of product to the US, and while it's on the water before it gets there, or in the air before it gets there, 24 hours later, there's a 20, 30, 40% tariff slapped on that product. So the uncertainty that's been introduced by this very volatile approach to tariffs and the threat of tariffs is the thing that really, really stops people from investing. However, I'm going to discuss some potential strategies to help you mitigate that uncertainty until such time as we get to a point where, for example, for Africa and Southern African countries, that you do have some certainty. And that may take some time, but it does look like the pattern is threaten high tariffs, negotiate lower tariffs, and whatever the deals are that are made off the back of that, that's what Mr. Trump is looking for. So that's just the reality of things. So before all of this, a lot of people just didn't know how tariffs work. So I'm going to illustrate that from a US perspective. So tariffs are really driven by the HS or HST code. So the Harmonized System for Tariff Code Classification, that's what they call it in the US. The rest of us just call it the HS code. And the starting point is that you have to get a HS code for your product. That is the classification for that product. That must be accurate. So there can be some latitude with choosing a code that's maybe got a slightly lesser tariff, but your product has to fall in with that, the details of that to be able to legitimately claim that tariff code, that HS code. So effectively, this determines the rate of tariff to the product being imported. And then the US Customs and Border Protection will look at the HS code. They will verify that HS code, and they will check the country of origin of the product. I'm going to speak about that in a moment. They will also look at any trade deal adjustments that may be made, like most favored nation, which now appears to be pretty much defunct in the US. But in any case, they'll look at any trade deals which may apply to that product from that country of origin, and that may discount the tariff or it may increase it depending on the situation. Customs will then also check the valuation of the product which is coming into the US, and that valuation, along with the tariff rate and any adjustments, is the amount that needs to be paid to effectively the IRS, and it's collected by a customs broker or a customs agent on behalf of the IRS, and then that money is passed on to the US Treasury, basically. So those duties get paid. And this is really important, as this next part is that enforcement, because the temptation now is, well, we're getting these high tariff rates, how can we work around that? And I really want to caution people on this one. The US Customs and Border Protection do these checks. So they do check the HS code, they check the country of origin, they check the customs valuation. And if any of those things are not accurate, or they find out that any of those things are not accurate, then enforcement in the form of fines, refusal of entry, destruction of the product, re-export of the product, and subsequently potentially an import ban into the US are all options that are on the table for US Customs Border Protection. And in fact, that's the same in the UK, it's the same in Europe. They might be called slightly different things in slightly different places, but it is important to really ensure that you've got the correct HS code, that you are have got the correct customs valuation, and that everything is in place. Otherwise, you may invest a lot of money and time and emotions into market entry in a certain market, and the whole thing can be taken away from you once you've built that business up. So my first piece of advice is play it by the book, do it properly, and make sure it all fits for your business model before you import into the US. So we do have some strategies. They're not all going to be applicable to everyone. So I'm just going to bring them all up and talk through each of these. So the first one is review your supply chain. And as we'll talk about in a moment in a little more detail, your supply chain is extremely important when it comes to country of origin. And I won't say any more about it right now, but having the right supply chain can make a huge difference to the tariffs that may apply given your products, etc. Second point is review your HTS codes or your HS codes, because there is overlap between HS codes, and you may find a lower rate of duty is applicable under one HS code from the same country of origin versus another HS code. Now, they don't overlap very much, but there are potential ways that you can maybe even make small adjustments to your product to ensure that you can receive a more favorable HS code and potentially, therefore, a more favorable tariff. So some of these things, if tariffs are blanket across the board, that's not going to help. But typically, what you find is that there are more favorable HS codes for certain types of products, etc. The third one is free trade zones, which allows you to import tariff-free or duty-free into a set area, which is in the US, and you can do the final manufacture of your product there, for example, and you only then pay relevant tariffs, which may be a lot less because it's coming from a free trade zone in there. But those are very specific agreements that are in place for free trade zones, and they tend to be operated by private organizations rather than government organizations. There are some exemptions, reductions, and refunds, which may be available. So, for example, if you import a lot of product to the US, you don't sell it, you decide you're going to export it again and sell it somewhere else, you can receive refunds on the tariffs you paid when you imported the product. So it's worth bearing that in mind to give you some more flexibility. The fifth one is to look at the formulation of your product, and if you can engineer it such that you can reduce the tariff either based on the actual ingredients to get to a new HS code, or because you're sourcing ingredients from a different country of origin, which maybe has more favorable rates on there, etc., then that may well be an option to look at in order to make things more cost effective. And then finally, there is the obvious one, which is when your cost goes up, or rather, when the tariff cost goes up, you may be paying the tariff if you're doing delivery duty paid, or the US importer may be paying the tariff because they have agreed to pay the duties. So there are various Incoterms that can be used to renegotiate here in order to share some of that cost with the US importer. Ultimately, they will be adding on to the cost anyway, which, as Leslie mentioned earlier, will drive up inflation, irrespective of what Mr. Trump says on this matter. But negotiating cost sharing with customers and suppliers is always an option, and that should be looked at as probably the easiest one out of all of these 6 areas to consider. So the 4 really best practice things you want to look at are optimizing the HS code, free trade agreements, if you can take advantage of those. Duty drawbacks and free trade zones are probably not practical for most people, but they do exist. And then supply chain engineering. So one of the things you can do on the HS code side of things, firstly, obviously use the correct one, but you can also request a binding ruling from Customs and Border Protection. That may take about 30 to 60 days to come through. But if you're doing a lot of business in a certain product and you manage to get a binding ruling, which is effectively applying to US Customs and Border Protection and saying to them, I believe this product has HS code 1234567. Do you agree? And if they agree, they put it in writing, they publish it on their the US Customs Border website, and then you can use that tariff, that HS code going forward. The other one, as I mentioned, is you could find a legitimate lower duty classification. And of course, you want to seek professional advice on these things. Free trade agreements, that's obvious. If there are free trade agreements in place, which there are less and less these days, but that may change in future again. So keep an eye on what's happening with free trade agreements, because that may determine that you can go to another market, or you can benefit from that free trade agreement in the US, etc. as well. And in supply chain engineering, as I mentioned, strategies like moving your production locations, use tariff engineering in terms of the country of origin of ingredients, negotiating supplier cost sharing, etc. These require a bit of research and again, some professional advice, and you may want to request binding rulings as a result of doing these things as well. So these are just some of the things that you can look at from that point of view. But the core of all of these things with regards to tariff is this phrase here, substantial transformation. So I'm just going to bring these 6 areas up, but I'm mainly going to talk about the substantial transformation. So the country of origin is determined by where the transformation into a new article occurs. So for example, blending, grinding, or being used as an ingredient in another final product would constitute substantial transformation. So you could be, even when China was on very high tariffs, you could be buying raw materials from China, including them in your product, and as long as the product was made and substantially transformed in your country of origin, then you can mark that product as your country. So made in South Africa rather than, for example, made in China. So that's just like an example. However, de minimis activities, so minimal activities like packing and labeling, do not qualify for substantial transformation. And I personally have seen quite a few customers buying all of the ingredients in from China, manufacturing and packing in the UK, and then claiming it's made in the UK. That is a recipe for disaster. Because quite a lot of these ingredients are simply not made in the UK. So customs looks at the ingredients list, and then you've got a problem from that point of view. So the second one is tariff shift for free trade agreements. So if a product was made from foreign ingredients but assembled or processed in a free trade agreement country, for example, Mexico or Canada, if as and when those free trade agreements are up, then it must undergo a tariff classification change to qualify for any preferential duty rates if they exist. And then there is the percentage-based origin. So some trade agreements exist that require a minimum percentage of the final product's value comes from a free trade agreement country. So these are other things that can be looked at. Direct shipment rule, goods must be shipped directly from the originating country to the US without passing through a non-qualifying country. China, for example, does regularly ship through the likes of Vietnam, where minor processing occurs, and that causes a lot of problems when those products land in the US and that gets discovered. Finally, all imports must be labeled with the correct country of origin. It is illegal to make that. It's against the law, and you can be fined and banned from importing if you don't pay that fine. If you make a false statement on the label, so made in Mexico, product of China, etc., can result in penalties and seizure, and that does happen quite a lot. So there is probably increased focus now on what's called anti-dumping. So China right now has got a massive surplus of products that were or was planned to be exported to the US. They're now sitting in Chinese warehouses. Those businesses understandably want to get that product sold before its shelf life expires, etc. So you're likely to see products being effectively dumped in other places. So there's a big risk of food fraud, etc. there. So one of the biggest things you can do, though, is you can spread your risk to other markets. As Leslie mentioned earlier, if you already are and have been exporting to the US, or indeed any of these, if you're exporting to any of these countries here, then you are more or less going to be eligible for exporting to the others, because they're all relatively similar in terms of the regulatory requirements. So there's some key trends going on in each of these markets. I would encourage you to do some research on these things. But all of these have got one huge thing in common, and that is very, very strong e-commerce links. And if you live in any of these countries, you'll know that Amazon is a huge player these days. And in fact, Amazon provides a really interesting and easy to access way for you to test your product in those markets. So do be aware that this is something we can help with. We help a lot of Amazon sellers be compliant for import, and we've got partners who can help with the listing and getting the product out there. It's much, much better way to test the market and get retail credibility. If you can demonstrate sales and demand for your products in these markets, then that can go a long way to landing you your first big retail client in any of these markets. So how can we help you? We can help with tariff consulting through our customs brokers partners. We can help you with new market entry in terms of doing the research on R&D in new markets, identifying the regulatory requirements, etc. And all of that can help you speed up market entry. And overall, the regulatory landscape is very, very similar in the US, UK, EU, and Canada. You've got in the USA, everyone knows you have to be FDA registered. But what maybe people don't know is that you actually have to do something similar in the UK, EU, and Canada as well. It's not called FDA registration, but you need to have a registered importer or registered food business operator to be able to import into any of these markets. The labels need to be compliant. There has to be a foreign supplier verification compliance in the US. In the UK and EU, it's called UK regulatory compliance. So the laws are very, very similar, but they're just not called the same thing. In the UK and EU, there has to be a UK or EU importer, either on the label or on the importer of record. And in EU and UK, there has to be traceability records maintained by the UK or EU importer. Customs support is always going to be needed, as is ongoing advice and support. So these are the key things. You'll get all of this in the slide and in the recording of this video later. But effectively, we've got the main regulatory authority, we've got the primary legislation, and we've got the requirements for you to get your product on the market in the US, from registration all the way through to FSMA compliance or Foreign Supplier Verification Program, label, etc. And then similar in the UK, EU, and also in Canada. So we can help with all of these particular areas. In the US in particular, we've done well over 2,000 FSVP shipments. These are Foreign Supplier Verification Program requirements, which is required for all human, pet, animal, dietary supplement, food kits, etc. We as an FSVP agent, we're actually inspected by FDA to ensure that we are doing this work in a compliant fashion. We've reviewed many, many hundreds of labels and conducted and implemented many, many hundreds of FDA registrations and so on there as well. We also have access to partners in logistics, customs, distribution, and online marketplace market entry as well. So we can make introductions there and help you get to market faster. So as mentioned before, please do add any questions to the chat. My contact details are here. Please do reach out if you feel that we can help you. Kos is our kind of key boots on the ground in Southern Africa. and I'm sure that he can also facilitate moving forward from that point of view as well. Okay, thank you. And well, looks like we've got Melanie added in as our panelist finally. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I shall hand back to, I'm going to hand on to Marlene, actually, who's going to present a little bit of a case study.
James, can I allow me to share, please?
Yeah, you're now the host. Share your screen. Marlene, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to, yeah.
No problem.
Are you able to see now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marlene Jose, and I'm speaking from Angola. Food Care is a food processing company based in Angola. We start to process our operation in 2020. We weren't able to get any kind of certification till 2022 because of COVID. But at the end of 2022, we were able to get HACCP and FDA certification. So we work with African traditional products, and we have been exporting to 6 countries. So here, I just want to present you our best product, that is cassava flour. We first starting to sell it as a finished product. Now we sell as well as a raw material, as is being used for to replace wheat flour. And as you can see, the label is FDA approved. We are able to export to US thanks to Global Import Agency and supported by USAID, that we are so sorry that does not exist anymore. But it was really important for us at the time on 2022, so to be verified and be able to export. A lot has been said about the tariffs and other markets, and I would like just to say to people that there is many markets outside that UK, Europe, US, and Canada. There is Middle East, Asia, that is becoming like a potential market for us at Food Care. And as Leslie and James said, so do everything by the book. It's really hard for us Africans to start to export to those countries, as we are not used with all the requirements. It's so difficult. But once you start and you have all the traceability, all the control, you are able to do. Luckily for us, we haven't had any problems so far with goods that we have been exporting. So at this time, we are working with Europe from Portuguese doors. We are trying to start to export to France and UK as well. We are exporting to US from New York. Now we have 2 new clients in Houston. We work with Canada market, South Africa, and last year we started a new products like green coffee and cocoa, and we had exported to Serbia and Dubai. So this year we are being approached by the Middle East, as it's written there, Dubai, and Asia. But it's the request is so big that I don't know when I will be able to supply. So that's why I want to emphasize that, okay, there is a lot of uncertainty, but please look for other markets. There is plenty of markets. Maybe you are not able to supply as a finished product, but as a raw material so that people is using to make another products. So we're still participating in many trade fairs in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe as well. And yeah, as soon as you have experience, and I really want to thank James for the support. We had a problem at the beginning of our process with payments, and it made a really huge difference in the way how we see things today. Thank you for all the support, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Marlene. I do remember your project back in the day there, and frankly, I was delighted to be able to help you at that stage, and I'm so glad to see that you've managed to progress from there. So thank you very much. So I think I can now pass on to Melanie, who is going to run some Q&A. If you do have any questions, please add those into the Q&A in your control panel, and I'm sure Melanie will be able to do that, to take care of that. Okay. So
good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much to Kaz and the panelists. It really was an interesting afternoon of listening. I especially enjoyed the case study example. It's so lovely and heartwarming to hear the success of an exporter and the exporter being able to get into market with the support of good help. So thank you very much for that, James. It definitely does warm my heart. I'm not seeing any comments in the chat just yet. I'd love to hear if anybody's got any questions for us today.
Well, while we're waiting for questions, it might be nice just to talk about something that I was talking about, funny enough, on the radio the other day. And we were talking about the fact that, the USA and the China, it's great that they've got around the table and everyone's very excited that they're, the markets are really excited. Everybody's really excited. And the Scottish people asked me, on the radio, whether or not, they thought that, Trump understood what it had all meant, because actually it meant that the Chinese have reduced their tariff to 10% on goods that they buy from the USA, which is very much in their favor. And Trump has kept his at 30%, which I think he still equates to being a win in some ways because it's a larger number. But of course, that means that the businesses that are importing the products from China into the USA pay 30% on their goods. So it's actually still increasing his inflation rate. And they said to me, do you think Trump knows that? Do you think it's part of his strategy? And I don't know. Perhaps we could all talk about that, because I'm not sure what he knows and what his strategy is, because every time he tweaks something over here, it sort of seems to change something drastically somewhere else that he hadn't thought about. And then right at the very end, the bond markets go like, you can't do that. Stop. And he has to stop.
That's a very good question, and I think for me, as the head of the Americas desk, UK and Europe for Westgrow, I think obviously got to be very careful of your commentary in and around that. But yeah, I know, I agree. I think I literally, there are mornings that I wake up and I just wonder, oh gosh, what happened overnight? And I think we all feel that way, that complexity of the market. But, one wonders if it's not, just kind of a bit of a holding paddle to unsettle your opponent, before you can get around the table to really grasp, or to come to some final conclusions. I know that there's, discussions underway in that space, and likewise, there's an expected visit from President Cyril Ramaphosa over to to the States next week. So we're all holding our breath,
Yeah.
you know, that those discussions will go well. Certainly, I know I've been integrally involved with the exporters here and the impact on exporters from the Western Cape, you know, into the US. And, you know, regardless of sector, from boating through to cosmetics and food. So we can definitely see, you know, where those, you know, the pain points are. Certain industries impacted more than others. For instance, your boating industry, you know, which was firmly positioned under AGOA, now obviously having a 10% duty on a very high value item. So, you know, it's quite crippling. You know, 60% of their exports are, you know, to some of those markets. So
That's desperate.
and
Melanie, we do
sorry
have
to
a question
interject.
that's come through. Oh, sorry.
oh, great. Okay, we've got some. We like questions. Let's see if I can see those.
Yeah. So there's someone called Herman, and
Yeah.
he's asked if I've never exported my products, where do I even begin? And I suppose he must begin with you to start off with, Melanie. But of course, both James and I would be more than happy to help him to have a think about how he's going to position them and how to do his research in the first place.
Well, Herman, I'm not sure where you're based, and I also can't see the chat. Can somebody tell me where he's based?
It doesn't say on the chat. Does anybody know? Herman, can you tell us? Can you tell us?
I can see that.
Maybe you can just
I'm in
unmute.
Johannesburg. Okay, I see. Okay, so Herman, I think the best place to start. You don't say where it is that you're looking to export to, but the starting point really is to connect in with your local trade, investment, and promotion agency in your region, which would be the Gauteng Development GGDA, and the agency is set up and funded by the local government in your region to help support in terms of getting you market ready. And when we talk about market ready, is assisting you with export advancement training. A lot of the trade, investment, and promotion agencies will offer that for free. So it's very important for you to connect in with them so that they can help you on the training side to get a high level understanding of the international domain. And then once you've gone through that training is then to be connected with an export manager in that same environment. The export manager will then be able to help you with the next leg of your journey. Say, for instance, you wanted to go into the States, they could then assist you in terms of potential partners that can help and support for, you know, FDA compliancy, potential logistics partners, potential warehouse partners, and then also which trade shows are valuable to your specific sector. I hope that is answering your question.
He says he wants to go to Dubai and USA, but I think that's a great start. Great idea.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, one comment I would like to make is that the one thing we've observed in the past, I would say 6 months to 12 months, is there's a lot more opportunity in the Middle East right now as well, you know, especially Dubai, both from import and export from Dubai. And in fact, one of the trends that we are seeing in the UK is that all of the really smart people, which is obviously not including me at this point, they're all going to Dubai to work from there, you know, benefiting from lower taxes, a Middle East hub, which is able to allow other business opportunities to develop, etc. But to address an earlier question, HS codes can be found on the US HTS website. I've put the link in the chat there. Don't know if that's come through or not, but they can be found and explored online. And to dig a little bit more about where do you start, because I think that was one of the questions. So yes, You need to try and look for local support you can get to perhaps help with maybe even grant funding, etc. We've seen that in the past. Exporting is always something that's of interest to governments, and there does always tend to be funding to assist with that, but they won't do everything for you. So from a compliance perspective, this is purely from the compliance perspective here. It's really important you've got solid food safety standards in place. So develop your HACCP system, your HACCP system. Make sure that's implemented by a qualified food safety professional. Make sure that your company is following the procedures in your food safety plan. Do the work on checking out what your label needs to be like in that marketplace. And then at that point, my advice is to reach out to a company like ours who really knows all of the individual compliance requirements that you're going to need, because there's nothing worse than you do all this work, you invest all this time, all this money, you get your product to customs in the target country, be that UK, EU, or the US, or Canada, and it's stuck. And if it's stuck, the label is not correct, then you've only got you've got three options. You either need to recondition or relabel that product in a warehouse in a foreign country, within a reasonable period of time, which is going to be costly, and it's going to take you time to find a local person or company that can do that. Or you need to destroy the product, in which case you made a total loss and you may be fined as well. Or you need to re-export that product, then relabel it, and then send it back. And if you've got something that's perishable, that is not going to be a good option. So super, super important to really understand the path of how you're going to get from A to B here and what the pitfalls are along the way and what you must address. So the regulatory aspect, it requires work, but it is not impossible. It can be done. And the key point is it all starts with your own food safety processes, which you should be doing anyway. None of your product that's going to be, going to make people sick or whatever. So you should be doing these things anyway. Document it, document that you're doing it, and make sure your labels are good. Engage with a regulatory expert who can really help you. And that's my advice, to be able to minimize any risks here.
Absolutely. James, thank you for that. There are also some interesting tools that are available from your local trade investment and promotion agency. For instance, decision making models where your agency can run reports. Say, for instance, I just saw Karen on the group posted about her oils, and she's looking to diversify in terms of her market. Your trade investment and promotion agency can then input the HS code for your product, and then can look for the demand for your product across the globe, so that you can then look at what are your best value markets in terms of trade. From a training perspective as well, your TPAs will take you through everything from market planning to developing your marketing strategy, to HS codes, to also choosing your freight forwarder and logistics, and all the different Incoterms and codes that come with that, right through the whole loop, so that you get a very good understanding of how best to position your brand in terms of the global domain. So I always say it's very important to ensure that you've got knowledge on your side, and utilize the resources that are available to you at a local level from your TPAs.
There's a question there from Martinus. He's based in Johannesburg, and he's already exporting to Kenya, looking for assistance to export to Europe and UAE. And they are FSSC 22000 certified. So it's worth maybe just talking a little bit about this, because this is really important. If you have a certification like FSSC 22000, ISO 22000, BRCGS, SQF, IFS, and a few others. These are what's called GFSI, benchmarked food safety certification schemes. So GFSI is effectively, it's a club of the top US and EU food retailers and manufacturers who set standards. So FSSC 22000 is one of these GFSI standards, and it's broadly accepted across the large retailers, across UK, EU, Canada, etc., and the US. And the benefit of this is FSSC 22000, basically a HACCP certification food safety system. And if you have this kind of certification, then the certification itself plus the audit report are two really, really easy ways for an importer in a foreign country to use to document that you meet the regulatory standards in that target country. So any of these certifications can be extremely useful. However, if you're a small business and you do not have those certifications, do not let that put you off, because you can do it if you have got a solid food safety management system in place. And that's exactly what we did with Marlene and her business, with Food Care and many others, in fact. So just because you're a small business does not mean that you cannot export. So, be encouraged that you can do it.
Okay, brilliant. See, there's also a question there from an anonymous attendee for the person says, I do 0.0 de-alkalized wines. How will I be able to partner in the UK? So James, I think that might be a good question for you, but just on a local level in South Africa, we do have Wines of South Africa. To register with them is always a good thing. They obviously have a network of representatives across the globe, and my understanding is also in the UK. I haven't connected with that person yet, having just taken over the desk, but they do have a person in New York City. They've got another person in Toronto, UK, I believe they do have, and then also in Germany. So, and last but not least, also in the Middle East and Asia. So that might be a good way to connect into the infrastructure. But James, over to you on that one.
Yeah, so de-alkalized wines and other drinks are essentially just beverage products in terms of the UK. There are certain labeling requirements that need to be on the actual label for the UK. But one interesting point is we have in our network here, a lady called Jane Mackay, and she is an expert in this whole area for US, UK, EU, and Canada. So I would suggest a call with Jane would be able to really open up exactly what your core requirements, and not only in the compliance space. We usually take care of that for Jane, but in terms of actual routes to market, she has on her books various distributors and connections in that whole space, because that's she operates in that whole go-to-market strategy for de-alkalized products, etc. So there's not a one size fits all for that particular one, but the basics are you still need to have the food safety side of things in place. You still may need to have registration. You will need to have registration for the US. And if you're importing into the UK or Europe, you need to be importing via a UK or EU-based importer of record or registered food business. So these are the basics of those things.
Okay, I see we have a message from Kaz that we need to start finishing up. There's quite a few more questions here, just in terms of priority.
Well, there's another one from Stacey about if you're new to exporting, would you suggest with Canada perhaps, as it seems slightly complicated. So to be honest with you, I would suggest that either the US actually is not as difficult as you think, and Canada's a little bit different from all the other ones. It's really just a registered importer. You need to get your food safety plan in place, and so on. but they're really all the same. They all want to protect their consumers from food which is not safe, right? So things they need to know who it's coming from, so some kind of registration. They need to make sure that whoever is importing and responsible for that product has reviewed the food safety plan and the food safety of the manufacturer and has that on record. Sometimes there's traceability issues. There's always label issues that need to be dealt with and so on as well. So I think it's irrelevant. I think the most important thing you want to be thinking about is, are there customers in the market, enough of them, that are going to buy my product? That has to be your starting point for all of this stuff. The regulatory is the regulatory, and you can get help with that.
May I just say one thing though? It depends on the size of your business as to whether or not you want to go over to the US straight away. And I think if you're on your journey to growing, it might be more sensible to think about some of the smaller markets, or certainly just find a state that you think would be interested in your product, rather than treat that state as a country. That's what we would do, and it's a nice, easy way of getting into that market without that huge. I remember working with a guy who had 120 UK reps out selling his product in the UK regions, and one person for United States. And I laughed, and he said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Because that poor guy must spend his entire time traveling. There can't be any time for actually selling anything, because he must be on a plane most of the time." And he hadn't really thought about that. And yes, it's a big thing.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm conscious we should finish talking. Sorry.
That's quite all right. Oh, sure. Okay, good. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but you certainly do have our email addresses. And if there is one specific panelist that you'd like to reach out to, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we'll answer your questions as best as we can. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much indeed. Bye.
Melanie, thank you. No, we're still here.
Oh,
We're just
no, still
concluding.
here.
Yes,
I was
we just
going.
we're just concluding. James, if you can just give me the sharing rights again, please. Thank you.
There you go. You're now the host.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to our. Yes, I'm not host yet. Yeah.
Apologies.
Can I try again.
I clicked wrong.
Awesome. Looks like you're still the host.
Okay, you are now.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to Leslie, James, Marlene, as well as my friend for some time. That's Melanie, who handled our question and answer. Before I do the conclusion, I just wanted to share again Melanie's screen. Besides being supported by James to handle her FDA registration, Melanie is also in one of the lookbooks that has been developed by 8023 Groupe, which is a tool that is being used to promote exports to North Africa, to Middle East, and obviously we'll update it and explore the US, UK, Canada markets. So I just wanted to. This is her page in the lookbook. It shows the products, certifications that are there, and of course the contact details. Right. So in terms of, I mean, there's been a lot that has been discussed, and it's clear that exploring export markets is not easy if you do not have someone who can help, who knows, who is knowledgeable, who is conversant with the different markets. So it's important to have a partner, and I'm saying that we are here, the three partners, 8023 Group. Export boot camps and global import agent. We are here to help you. We can provide export training, group or at an individual basis. We can conduct export readiness assessments so that you are really ready for these different markets. We help with market entry compliance. You heard about FDA compliance, meeting the Canadian requirements, UK requirements, EU requirements. Also, business linkage support. I heard someone talking about, okay, we've been exporting somewhere, now we want to try the other markets. Yes, you need someone who can help you in terms of providing those linkages. Trade show participation as well as support. This we can also provide. Some of the partners here also help in terms of trade finance support, working with various partners and acquisitions. There's a point that was raised earlier to say your location. One of the strategies is to see, probably we need to change where your product is being produced. So we can also help with that. So partners as well as trade support institutions that are on the call, please reach out to 8823 Groupe. We have got these contact details for you. Global Import Agent, Export Bootcamps, West Grow, for those that are in the Western Cape, Food Care, for those that would want to get to hear it from the horse's mouth in terms of the experience, and then the partner on the continent, that's 8823 Groupe. Please feel free to reach out to us. So allow me again to say thank you so much. I think this has been great. I'm looking to a scenario where we might have to do a market specific session. Let's say just focusing on Canada and go into detail, focusing on the UK, going into detail, focusing on the US, going into detail. Today was an overview just to make sure that exporters consider export market diversification. Once again, thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for the presentations. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Mr.
Bye.
Cooks. Thank you.
Thank you.